All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Allison Jornlin. Tonight we're going to be talking about Paranormal Women, A Hidden History, her new YouTube channel. You can also find her on Facebook. Her last name is spelled Jornlin, just in case you want to look it up while we're talking. Allison, how are you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm just great. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You know, it's not in... in this world that seems to be starting to acknowledge a lot of history that we didn't pay attention to when it comes to race, gender, sex, and all those things, it's not shocking that one would be interested in the Paranormal Women, A Hidden History. And I assume that there are quite a bit, seeing how there are quite a bit of them on the negative side. I mean, going all the way back from Lilith and witches and tempting and Eve, there's always been a negative one, but
let's talk about that. There's definitely something in there.
Right. So what drove you to this? What got you started?
Well, I just started a new YouTube channel, as you mentioned, youtube.com/paranormal women. And I just got my special custom URL so you can get directly to my videos going through that YouTube URL. And I started it because I had stumbled upon some amazing women that had made some major contributions to the paranormal. And, of course, I'm really into this stuff. I've been a paranormal investigator for over 20 years. And I was just surprised that I knew nothing. I knew nothing about these women or the history of some of the paranormal achievements that they contributed.
Yeah, the only one that I can think of off of the top of my head, and, for the audience, just to kind of put it into perspective, if you tell people to name 10 great actors and 10 great actresses, I guarantee you they'll go through the first list a whole lot faster.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
of the way this world works. The only one I can think of, and now I'm not even thinking of her name, but her name is much bigger than her husband. It's the insidious.
You're thinking of Conjuring. The Conjuring?
Yeah, The Conjuring.
Yeah,
that's the one.
You're thinking of Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Right.
And
yes.
And it's funny that you say that because just a few weeks back, actually, I think it was in July. It just feels like the summer left us too quickly. But back in July, there was this
summer.
Yeah, there was. There was a Comic-Con panel about Wonder Women of the Paranormal, it was called. Oh. And it starred all these women from the paranormal TV shows. And so I was able to get a press pass for that, and it was all virtual, like most of our events are this year. But I was able to get in and ask questions of some of these luminaries of paranormal TV, and I said, hey, you're Wonder Women of the Paranormal. What paranormal pioneers that were female inspired you? Mm-hmm. And what was really sad is that they either named Lorraine Warren, and there were about 5 people on this panel. They named Lorraine Warren, or they named each other, but they couldn't think of anyone else.
Yeah.
And if you're logging into my YouTube channel, youtube.com/paranormal women, you will see, even from the few videos I've been able to put up there so far, that there are a lot more women that have made a major contribution. And I just think it's time that...
Sorry, go ahead.
We learn that history. I'm sorry. I just think it's time that we learn that history.
No, I agree with you. And definitely on a contemporary level, that's the case. This show also airs on a podcast network called ParaX. And ParaX, practically every but one that I deal with there is a woman. Most of the shows that I've listened to are hosted by women. It's I assume it's very prevalent in this scene right now. I don't know. Later we're going to talk about the Milwaukee Paracon and this stuff, but I'm a shut-in. I am literally a shut-in. So I deal with the people up there.
Yeah.
But I would assume that there are a lot now. especially with
Yes.
sensitives, people who are possibly sensitive, being an acceptable addition to the field now. I think women are a little more comfortable with claiming that title. I don't know how to put that.
Well, yeah. Let's talk about that. You were mentioning previously witches and Lilith, the first wife of Adam,
Mhm.
and all these paranormal images of women.
Right.
And what my channel is promoting are women investigators. So for a long time, there have been
I knew
acceptable
that, by the way.
roles.
I knew you weren't doing it about
Yeah,
witches.
yeah,
I
yeah.
was just pointing
No,
out that
no.
that's what we think of. Yeah.
Right, right, and I'm right there with you because I've done a presentation of the same name at many paranormal conferences, and I started out talking about all these um, all these stereotypes of women in the paranormal and accepted roles for women in the paranormal. And they don't usually include investigators. So on my channel, that's who I'm profiling. I'm profiling people that maybe don't fit that medium or poltergeist agent type role,
Right,
because
right.
certainly
I just did it.
people
Oh my God,
historically.
I just did it. I'm sorry.
No, but that's part of this. That's part of why this channel is necessary, and I've done it too. So we accept women as poltergeist agents. We accept women as clairvoyants or mediums. We also accept women as witches, as you said. But as far as accepting them as an investigator in like more of a scientific role, you really don't see that. And there certainly were women that embodied those values. And when I think about like the father of the paranormal, there's everybody that calls up Charles Fort, who was a 20th century writer and researcher. And he spent his days in the New York Public Library tracking down all the weird stories in the science journals and magazines and newspapers of the day and compiled them into 4 books. So that's why we call unusual phenomena Forteana, and that's why we call Charles Fort the father of the paranormal. But for me, I was wondering, well, is there a mother of the paranormal? If there's a father, there's got to be a mother. I mean, there's 2 sides to this equation. And so I found her, and her name is Catherine Crowe. And Catherine Crowe was actually a pioneer in the 1850s. So in the mid 1800s, that's when she began to be active. And so way before Charles Fort, she was out there tracking down ghost stories. But even more than that, if you read her book, which is called The Night Side of Nature, you'll see it's an amazing 400-page compendium of not just ghost stories, but poltergeist stories, doppelgangers, twin telepathy, out-of-body experience, near-death experience. Basically, if you thought of it, it's in here.
Right.
And this book came out in 1848. Now, Catherine Crowe, the author of this book, so she's born in 1803, died in 1876. So she lived in Victorian England. And this was not a time when women could vote or even own property.
Right.
But she, soon after getting married, her marriage was not happy, and she left her husband. She prevailed upon friends to sneak her away in the night to Edinburgh, and she reinvented herself in Edinburgh, Scotland, as a novelist, and was someone who was well known to the literati of the day. And then as she was writing her novels, she somehow became very interested in the paranormal. And actually, the reason she became so interested is although she was English, she was exploring what other writers in other countries were writing about. So she could read German, she could read French, and at that time, she was just amazed about the literature coming out of Germany from doctors and scientists regarding the paranormal. And she was like, well, I have to write something about this. Actually, first she translated a book called The Seerest of Prevorst. That was a book written by a German doctor about one of his patients who exhibited these extraordinary gifts of mediumship. And so she was like, I have to translate that into English. She did that in 1845. And then as she was reading more German publications, she learned about poltergeist and she learned about doppelgangers. And she's like, well, I have to write a whole book about the paranormal and make these concepts available to English readers. And so that's what she did. And her book came out in 1848 and it became quite a blockbuster. And I think arguably it is still, I think, the most famous and successful paranormal book ever written. It went through about 16 editions in 6 years. And she became tremendously famous, and the book was tremendously popular at the time. And so she was the one who brought a lot of these concepts that we talk about a lot today into English language usage. And we just take for granted that we know what poltergeists are, or that we know the concept of a doppelganger. But Catherine Crowe was really the one who brought these words and concepts to our language.
You know, that's interesting. I've thought about before how many German words are included in a lot of this stuff, and I always kind of wondered why. But that's because a lot of the spearhead of this looking into sort of came out of Germany, and then she translated this stuff and brought it across.
Absolutely.
And I know Germans are known for having words for things that we have collections of words for. We don't have singular words for Schadenfreude or for some of these things.
Right, absolutely. So she actually, Catherine Crowe, should be given credit for the first scientific or attempting to be scientific type ghost hunt. I mean, certainly there were witch hunters in the past and religious.
I don't know if that was really a noble.
Right.
Noble
I'm not
research,
saying. I'm not saying it is, but there were people that were tracking down the paranormal, but it was usually for the church, and usually to stamp it out. So
right.
So not the most open-minded of people, maybe. But she was the first one who is documented to doing a ghost hunt in 1854 in Edinburgh. And this is exciting for me because so far, I posted a video about it. I asked a lot of notables in the paranormal community for their opinion to see if they could find an earlier documented ghost hunt, which would be a type of ghost hunt that is a paranormal investigation. What paranormal investigations have been done that we'd recognize as such? And nobody's come forth with anything earlier than 1854. But if you're hearing this now and you have an idea, please add to my learning. Go to the YouTube channel, look at the video about the first ghost hunt, and then please chime in to the conversation. This is very much about learning about history. So if you got some compelling history to share, please do. But so I'm excited to think of her as, really the person who pioneered paranormal investigation. Because of her publication of The Night Side of Nature and then its subsequent popularity after 1848, she, of course, received lots of messages from people, letters telling her about their own ghost stories. And so one of the people that approached her was a lawyer who had this house in Edinburgh that he just could not keep filled with tenants. He could not let this house. No one wanted to rent it, no matter how low he made the monthly rent. Nobody wanted to touch it. And so he came to her, telling her that he thought that it was haunted. And so she was really excited about bringing some people in and trying to get to the bottom of it. So she actually came with two other men, in addition to this lawyer, and two other women. And one of the women was actually a clairvoyant. And she was brought along under the pretense of the idea that this was a house that Catherine was interested in buying. And so she just wanted this woman to submit to hypnotism, because under hypnotism is the only time she exhibited clairvoyance. So she was like, well, could we put you under and then just tell me what you think about the house? Is it a good buy? Should I pass on it?
It was like a double research opportunity for her.
Yes. She didn't actually want to buy it, but that's she told.
Double research the haunted house and the clairvoyant.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And that was a big thing at the time. She's got a lot of information in here about mesmerism, or magnetism, as it was known at the time. So she was a big fan of exploring altered states, shall we say. And so today we know this as hypnosis. And so this woman was hypnotized by one of the people in the party. And, perhaps a doctor. There were medical hypnotists at that time. It was very in vogue to use it for healing purposes. Mm-hmm. So this woman was hypnotized, and then she was able to exhibit clairvoyance. And when asked about the house, she warned Catherine against it. She said, no one should ever buy this house because it's haunted by two ghosts who were murdered here, not in the current house, but in the previous house that stood here. And she said, these ghosts will trouble you, so do not buy the house. And then as they're just sitting there in the dark, of course, if you've been on a paranormal investigation, there's a lot of sitting around in the dark with little happening. They were able to light some candles. They weren't seeing anything, but they all heard this metallic clanging near the door. They were in the back parlor of the first floor of this 3-story house, and that was supposed to be the area of most activity. So they were sitting in the back parlor, and then they all heard this sound as if two pieces of iron were smashed together, and they heard that sound coming from the door to the room. And of course they couldn't find any reason any explanation for that sound. But then after that, the house was pretty quiet, and Catherine said, well, let's extinguish the candles and see what happens. And then the woman, the hypnotized woman who ostensibly had been sleeping on the couch, she startled and sat up and pointed to the middle of the room and said, there, look there. And everybody's like, what do you see? And she said that she saw these lights emanating from the floor, and nobody else saw it until she took Catherine's hand. And Catherine began to be able to see the same thing, these white lights coming in waves from the floor at about 2 to 3 second intervals. And Catherine kicked herself after the ghost hunt, because she was like, well, why didn't I have the clairvoyant hold everybody's hand, or hold different people's hands in succession to see if that ability to perceive these lights would be transferred in that way? But she didn't think about that until it was too late. But what Catherine was amazed at is that she was seeing what the clairvoyant was seeing, and the way that they were able to communicate that is, Catherine said, well, every time you see the lights come up, squeeze my hand. And so as they were doing that, Catherine was able to see that their experience was coinciding. And then as they left the house, Catherine had seen one more thing, but nobody else reacted. So she waited until the end to say, well, I actually saw something else as well. I saw a bright diamond of light emerge in the center of the room. And nobody else had seen that except for the lawyer. The lawyer who owned the property said, yes, I did see that. And he described it as a very bright oxyhydrogen spark. And so that did it for Catherine, because that was a very specific description that matched exactly what she had seen.
Right.
So that, as far as we know, is the first ghost hunt, 1854, Edinburgh, Scotland.
Yeah, that's wild. And that her book came out 3 years before Mary Shelley died. Did she write under her own name originally?
She did write under her own name. That's a good question. She was able to write under her own name, and actually became quite famous in 1841 for a mystery story called Susan Hopley, The Adventures of a Maidservant. And although Catherine Crowe, she did live in the upper crust of English society, she was very aware of people that didn't have such fortunate circumstances, and wrote about the travails of a maidservant who becomes embroiled in a mystery, a murder mystery, and her brother is accused of the crime. So she has to go through many perils to clear his name. And so that was a very famous book at the time. And actually, Edgar Allan Poe's Murders at the Rue Morgue wouldn't come out until April of that year, 1841. Her book had come out in January of that year, and some believe that she influenced Poe to write what is usually recognized as the first modern mystery story, but others point to The Adventures of Susan Hopley.
That's interesting, because nowadays you have people like Whitley Strieber and stuff like that, which I like these people, but I do find it somewhat dubious that they are science fiction paranormal writers that are also paranormal researchers and stuff. It's interesting that she was a writer that was interested in the dissection of a situation by writing something like mystery, because mystery, there's no paranormal to it, but it is interested in picking apart all the little facets, and it sort of shows a potential of a person's personality of going into the paranormal with the idea of, I'm going to solve this mystery, as opposed to, I'm looking for something I already obviously want to believe in.
Right. And what's I think most exciting about this book, and my edition is actually the Colin Wilson edition, and he's a famous writer from England, was a famous writer from England, who wrote a number of paranormal books. And he cites Crowe as really the beginnings of the psychical, the Society for Psychical Research. Although they wouldn't admit, nobody admits to, at the SPR, saying that she inspired them. Colin Wilson notes in the foreword to this edition that she really pioneered a lot of those methods that were later adopted by the SPR.
Right.
So that's the exciting thing when you read this book. She is pulling together all these amazing stories. So you certainly get those amazing ghost stories, and there's a lot of adventure content in here, let's say. But then you also get her analysis, somebody who's very thoughtful about what may or may not be happening, and proposes that she just wants science to seriously take a look at this. That's the purpose of the book, that she's bringing all these extraordinary phenomena out in the open, and she wants science very much to investigate, and that was the purpose of her book. And it's interesting that later Charles Fort in his books of the early to mid 1900s, how he does a similar thing. He's out to get scientists and kind of corner them about these things that they can't explain.
Right.
And he's a little bit more mean-spirited about it, maybe, but she's just beseeching them to recognize that there is some reality to these phenomena, and that there should be serious study. That's what she's promoting in her work.
I think that's a crisis that the paranormal has returned to here lately, and that is that it seems like through the 80s and the beginning of the 90s and the 70s, that there was a focus on nuts and bolts, paperwork, research, stuff like that. But it seems like this level of spirituality and singular experience has come in that, while it's interesting, is not scientific methody, to the point where it's really kind of getting us anywhere. And it seems to be overtaking the fields, I think.
Oh, definitely. I think there's this huge chasm between like paranormal research and parapsychology. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people that are interested in paranormal research are just really interested, or they get started in being interested from the TV shows. Mm-hmm. And the TV shows are presenting a very skewed and inaccurate perspective. You mean
like the reality TV shows like Ghost Hunters and stuff like that?
Yeah. Right. That's not reality at all. And I think a lot of us know that. I think a lot of us know that, but there are still people who don't know that and still look at Zach Baggins, for example, as he's some kind of paranormal hero, when really he's just a huckster out there trying to make a buck. Right. Hate to say it, but he's not an investigator. And but that's how people get started these days. They see the shows, they think that's what being a paranormal investigator is about, when really there are people doing serious research, like at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, for example. There is a program where you can become a parapsychologist. You can actually go there and study parapsychology. And a lot of it has to do with experiments, laboratory experiments, and statistics, and a lot of things that maybe aren't as sexy as the idea of going out and yelling at some ghosts with Zach Baggins. But right. I mean, that's where you're going to find the real stuff. That's not as beholden to that. Well, it's not beholden to ratings. It's not beholden to popular opinion. It's just, based on what can science tell us. And actually, I want to mention that Carolyn Watt is the head of the program over there at Edinburgh University, and she's one of the modern women in the paranormal today. And every fall, every spring, she offers a parapsychology class that's online with via Zoom and other video conferencing, where you can be in a situation where you can learn from the top parapsychologists out there today. Oh. And that's a class that's not known about by very many. There's also another one that's run every February and has been for 10 years, actually over 10 years. And it's absolutely free. It's run by a researcher named Nancy Zangroni, who's worked for the Rhine Institute for many years. And she has this free class. It's called ParaMOOC, and I know that sounds very funny, but MOOC means a massively open online classroom or something like that. It's an educational term. But if you Google ParaMOOC,
it's the educational version of
PARAMOOC.
Yeah. It's the educational version of an MMORPG.
Yeah, something like that. So if you just Google ParaMOOC, you can get in touch with Nancy and actually see presentations by world-class paranormal investigators and parapsychologists. Every year in February, it's about a month-long class, and it's amazing. And I'm telling people about it today because I'm not here to make money. I'm not selling a book. I got a free YouTube channel, and ParaMOOC is a free educational opportunity. I'm just telling you about it because I want you to be educated. There's so much more out there. So please go Google ParaMOOC, PARAMOOC, and get in touch so that next year when I attend, there's more than 20 people in the class.
Right.
Because there's people attending from all over the world, and you get to chat with them. You get to chat with the instructors. You get to ask questions, not just see the presentations. So there's so much amazing paranormal learning available today that people really aren't availing themselves of, and it's free. So please do. There's plenty of good research out there that is freely available to you, and a lot of it is surprisingly exciting, and more exciting than the TV shows for me because it's real, and it's not a bunch of people sitting around in a room very quietly going, what's that? Right. There's more depth to it. So are you ready for another paranormal trailblazer?
Well, I am, but unfortunately we're coming up on break time here, so I'm going to say we're talking with Allison Jornlin. We're talking about Paranormal Women, A Hidden History, and you were listening to her right here on Radio Wasteland. And when we come back, we're going to talk about more Paranormal Women, A Hidden History. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Allison Jornlin. We're talking about Paranormal Women, A Hidden History, her new YouTube channel, as well as a few other things as well, because that is my style. I'm tangent maker, and here's my tangent that I bring up all the time. A lot of people come to the paranormal from their own experiences. I come to it from fiction. And when I think of parapsychology, I think of fiction that I love. And the first name that comes to mind for me is Shirley Jackson, because that's kind of really where I kind of learned the term in House on Haunted Hill and stuff. But what exactly is a parapsychologist?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think a lot of people hear that word like in Ghostbusters, for example,
right.
and they want to take on that mantle of being a parapsychologist. And although I'm not an expert, I think that you do, if you're going to call yourself a parapsychologist, you're going to have to go to school for parapsychology. And really the only place you can get a degree today is at the University of Edinburgh. So, you are looking at the paranormal through a psychological lens. So it's not only abnormal psychology, but it's looking at the limits of human experience, or these borderlands of human experience. So parapsychology does deal with ghosts. It does deal with extrasensory perception. Most of the things that the paranormal enthusiast is interested in, a parapsychologist is somebody who would study that. But they would study that from a university trained perspective. Right. So
with the scientific debunk attitude first.
Yes, absolutely. And they're also looking at statistics, for example, to determine how likely some of these outcomes are. To separate things from chance, for example. Mm-hmm. So, although I haven't yet taken that course from the University of Edinburgh, I'm hoping to. I talked to Carolyn in fall, and it really was close. It's about 300 pounds, which is
$450 about.
Yeah, it's kind of expensive for me. So, but I'm saving up for spring. Right. But I do enjoy taking classes from Nancy Zingroni every February for Paramook, and that's because I get different perspectives from people who are not just well versed in history, the history of different phenomenon, but also looking at it from really a hard-hitting scientific perspective.
Right. One of your video titles definitely I'm hoping we're going to talk about is Zora and the Zombies.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Let's jump ahead. We can talk about her, and then maybe if we have time, I'm working on a video right now about Alexander David Neal, and speaking of words, we're talking about Catherine Crowe brought us the words poltergeist and doppelganger, and it was really Alexander David Neal who brought us the term and the concept of tulpa. She brought that from Tibetan monks, and she was the one who retrieved it and put it into English language usage in her book Magic and Mystery in Tibet. But
the word was tulpa?
Tulpa, yes. So we can come back to that if you want to get right into zombies. I'd love to talk about Zora Neale Hurston because not only is she a woman, she was born in 1897 and died in 1960. So not only is she a woman, but she was an African American during a time when racism was, it's still evident today, but it was
undeniable.
Undeniable, yes. Right. It was really a barrier for a lot of people. So Zora Neale Hurston, she also was a novelist, like Catherine Crowe, but she was a novelist during the time of the Harlem Renaissance, and that was in the 1920s when African American writers became popular nationwide, and that's a period called the Harlem Renaissance. And in her writing and also in her studies, she started to become very interested in voodoo. And I think it started because, she wasn't only a novelist. Zora Neale Hurston also went to school and studied anthropology under the father of anthropology, as he's known, Franz Boas. And his idea was that we need to do away with social Darwinism, and that there is value in every culture. So he was very interested in sending her to different places to collect African American folklore, and she was African American, so it worked out because she was going about it in a way that people who weren't of color couldn't do, because there was such a barrier to understanding between cultures, and
probably a fear of
yes,
letting people know about that aspect of certain
absolutely
West African culture and Haitian culture. Yeah.
Absolutely. So and Zora definitely felt that other people that had made attempts to collect certain like African American or African or African societies of the diaspora type folklore had not come up with things that were very accurate in her mind. So it was great for her to have have that opportunity to go explore. And first she actually went home to Eatonville, Florida. Now, she had been born in Alabama, but her family really wanted her to have opportunities that she couldn't have there. So when she was 3 years old, they moved to Eatonville, Florida. And the unique thing about Eatonville was it was an all-black town, and it was the first incorporated all-black town in the nation. And her father was actually the mayor and helped draft the laws of the town. So the exciting thing is that Zora didn't really grow up in racism because everybody in town just looked like her, and they didn't have that hanging over their heads like people in larger communities had. It was a community of just over 300 people and living in harmony, and she was really glad to have the opportunity to go back and collect folklore from her friends and neighbors. And so she would first publish a book called Mules and Men, which is it's an interesting book. It's a lot of fun if you can get it on an audio book. But the first part of it is all about these tall tales. So and what the people in town called big old lies, and it's very funny. And then near the end of the book, it takes a weird turn where she heads off to Louisiana, to New Orleans, Louisiana specifically, to investigate hoodoo or voodoo doctors there, or two-headed doctors as she calls them. And she would study under many of them during that time period. And one of them that she talks about in the book is Luke Turner, who was a relative of the great voodoo queen Marie Laveau, and he had learned from her. And so she learns from Luke Turner. And, she talks about the initiation rituals and all the ordeals she had to go through. And so it's really interesting how the book starts out as tall tales and then ends up somewhere very magical, and it has a very different tone. And then a few years later, in 1938, she would publish Tell My Horse. And that was a book about voodoo and life in Haiti and Jamaica. And she was able to secure a Guggenheim grant to actually go to these countries and live there for several months, embedded with the people, and learn about their cultural practices. And she found some magical things in her travels. And the interesting thing about her is, she's always looking for someone who's trying to fool her. So she's very skeptical, but when there's something that happens that she can't explain, she doesn't try to explain it away. She just puts it out there that something strange happened. Here it is. How do you explain it? I can't. So there's some amazing things in the book called Tell My Horse. Now, as far as zombies go, she found that zombies were a social construction. Zombies aren't the dead risen again. But what she would discover is that it was really part of the economy, I guess you would say, where there were these bokors, which are voodoo priests who are on the dark side. They're like the Lord of the Sith, not the Jedis.
Right.
And so the bokors would harvest these zombies to work their plantations. And she knew at that time, even in 1838, that it was a drug that was being that had been brought in from Africa, or the knowledge had been handed down from Africa among families. And And so she is very interested in finding the poison, but doesn't have the connections to do that. And she talks to doctors who are really really want to find the poison to try to find a possible antidote, because they are left with people who sometimes escape their slavery as zombies and then are never able to be integrated back into society because their minds are so destroyed. So it's not,
Right.
It's not the George Romero type zombies that we're talking about. The real zombies are people who are taken from the grave and then made to forget who they are, essentially, and just work as slaves. And
like Serpent and the Rainbow.
yes, actually, I have that book right here as well. So, and in Serpent and the Rainbow, Wade Davis, the author of the book, he actually talks about Zora Neale Hurston. So if you read this book, you'll find out something about Zora.
I hate to admit this. I'm the horror movie guy. I know it from Wes Craven.
Oh, and that's okay. That's okay, because surprisingly, I did watch that movie again recently, and I remember the schlock, of course, but as I was
Don't
watching,
bury me, I'm not dead. Yeah.
yes, I remember the sensationalist aspects, but in watching it, I saw the parts of reality that he took from the Serpent and the Rainbow.
Right.
So it's not entirely devoid of truth, I guess you would say, but Wade Davis actually comes to believe that that the practice of zombification is actually being done as a form of punishment. It's judicial in a way, that somebody is judged, and this is their punishment to live out the rest of their life as a zombie. And then so he comes to, the actual author Wade Davis comes to understand it in a different way, as something that is upholding society and not a negative influence in society. But Zora definitely has a different take on it, and one would wonder.
They might both be right.
So
it just depends on what society you're holding up. I mean,
right.
Society doesn't necessarily mean a good thing,
Absolutely. So, and even today, when you think about the police force, there are certain people who look at it one way and certain people who see the other side of it.
Right. Yeah.
And the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I suppose that the truth of zombification is somewhere in the middle too. But
who wrote The People's History of the United States was
that is that's one of that director's projects that I like. I
forget his name. It's skipping me, but in the
Oliver Stone.
No. Wrote the book.
Oliver Stone did the series.
Yeah.
And I forgot who he worked with, who actually did.
But in the foreword of the book, he wrote that historians are just like anybody else, and we're inherently biased to what we like. And so, you got to read a couple of history books and know that history is somewhere in the middle because of the bias that we put into, the way we think about it. We don't have too much more time left here.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell me about this new video that you're working on, that you were starting?
Okay, so if you want to hear more about Zora and the zombies, you can look at the video. It'll tell you the story I was about to recount anyway. And I'm working on some movies about Alexander David Neal right now, who was born in 1868 and died in 1969. Yes, she was 101, people. So she was living right. And one of the things that she loved to do is travel. She was French, and her family moved to Belgium during political unrest. But she also came from wealth as well. And what she used her wealth to do is explore Asia. And she was very motivated to become a Buddhist in the best way possible, and to know Buddhists. And that's why she explored many parts of Asia and actually met a Dalai Lama who was in exile at the time, but gave her permission to break into the forbidden Tibetan city of Lhasa, the capital of Tibet. And she actually dressed in disguise with just as a beggar. She would dress up as a beggar, and under her robes she would have a pistol just in case she got into trouble. But she was able to access the city of Lhasa in Tibet with the Dalai Lama's blessing, and under the noses of authorities who kept all other Westerners out.
Right.
And she was able to uncover some amazing abilities, like the ability to create thought forms, or tulpas as we know of them today. And so I'm working on a video about tulpas. I'm also working on a video about tumo, which is another Buddhist skill, the ability to control your body heat, something that's popularized by Wim Hof today. But you first were able to read about it in Magic and Mystery in Tibet by Alexander David Neal.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to that one. This whole topic has been, really interesting. I mean, when I saw the topic, I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting, but I find myself definitely all the more sucked in by it. So coming up, you got the 2020 Milwaukee Paracon?
Yes, I'll be speaking there about some historical figures from Milwaukee Forteana and Milwaukee Paranormal. That's why it's called Bride of Forteana this time. I always tell stories from my own community, all kinds of ghost stories, UFO stories, anything strange that happened locally. I'll talk about it at the conference. But this year, of course, I'm working in women in the paranormal who were from Milwaukee or the Wisconsin area.
Right. And when does that happen?
That happens the weekend of October 10th. The speakers will be speaking on October 10th, and there's other events on October 9th and October 11th.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, we only have an hour here, but I can tell we could easily go for another hour because I have a lot of things that I'd love to ask you.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you again.
Great. You've been listening to Allison Jornlin here, Paranormal Women, A Hidden History. Where do people find out more about you?
Just go to youtube.com/paranormalwomen.
Sounds good.
Thanks again.
Yeah, sorry. Apparently there's some sort of heavy construction going on outside of my my door here, but
these things happen.
I know. But again, you've been listening to Allison Jornlin here, Paranormal Women on YouTube. This has been very interesting, very enlightening, and why don't you come back on after Milwaukee Paracon, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about it and how it went.
I would love that. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much for being on. That was great. Thank you.